Hi, my name is Cherie. Welcome to my journey. And today is my Talk Trash Tuesday. And we're not going to stop doing that until we don't need to talk trash anymore. Right? We talk the trash on Tuesday, and then we throw the trash out on Thursday. Okay? Okay. So long as we got that clear, you understand where I'm coming from. Maybe. We gotta always, preface that with those who know. Right? Right. So, hold on. I got my pop well. This is what it looked like. Okay? If you can find it on sale, buy it. Okay. Hi, welcome to my Talk Trash Tuesday. Here's the thing that, I want to talk about. I want to talk about the abrasiveness of the battle of wills that are happening in our world today, right? It's an abrasiveness where one party wants it this way and another party wants it that way, okay? So it's an abrasiveness. It's kind of like when salt water meets fresh water, or one fault meets a sub-fault. You know what I'm saying? So when we see this happening in the world, on the planet, we know it's also happening in the world. Like I said, everything I see to me is a reflection of what's going on the earth. Okay? In the earth, on the earth, within the earth. Okay? So anyway, today, I'm on a little excursion. I was watching videos, and it came to my attention that throughout all of this displacement, that there's a lot of pillaging going on, right? The displacement creates pillaging, right? When you displace somebody, the spoils are left over, right? Like if somebody gets evicted, you find all of their belongings that they can't carry with them, curbside, right? Or if somebody feels like, they have to sell everything that they got just to maintain, their lifestyle, then, they have to pawn their stuff or, try to sell their stuff. That was one of the things that had, was brought to my attention, is that we have all of these thrift stores now becoming more important than, say, a designer store, right? And let's be honest, a lot of these places, these thrift stores, they're getting designer things because some people have bought designer things. I know several people that I know have lost their job and had to move and this, that, and the third, and are probably, having to sell their, $1,000 Coach purses and luggage, okay? But, I'm passing by Goodwill right now, and Goodwill is packed with all of these people, trying to find stuff that they could reuse. Now, sometimes spiritual people are like, don't buy somebody else's, things because it has their energy on it. And that could be true. That could be true. Especially if, somebody had, emotional attachment placed on their things. Okay? And the only way that you could truly, permission, because I had sold a lot of my jewelry. I sold a lot of, things that, I never thought I was going to ever have to sell, during, this 6-year period of whatever you want to call it, right? I call it recession and depression. And those have a whole different, economic, definition than what we use in plain language. So, I'm on my way to a reseller store. I said all of that to say I'm on my way to a reseller store. Right. Now, I've been getting stuff from reseller stores lately, right? Like I got the air fryer from the reseller store, and, I had to basically learn how to use it, how to clean it, because when you get it from a reseller store like Goodwill or something like that, usually, it's not brand new and there's no instructions except, what's on the actual appliance. But cooking instructions, for different recipes, usually are not included. So I have been watching videos doing that, because I bought an air fryer for $8 at Goodwill. Right? And I've been to At Home and some other stores, and usually a brand new air fryer. Well, some Goodwills also had the item selling for $20, but the one I got a bigger one for $8. Okay, so different stores have different prices, just depending on the location. So that's why this particular reseller store is a little bit out of the way. It says it's going to take me about 30 minutes to get there, right? And because of the location, I'm figuring, they're probably going to have some really good stuff, at a decent price. Definitely not at what do you call, full sale price, but I usually don't get out that much unless, something interests me. And when I get there, I'll tell you what store it is that I'm at. But until then, I'm just going to talk about, the different reseller things. I don't know why they're always doing work right over here. When I come through here, it's like this is the main area that they're doing work. Work convoy. What are you doing though? What are you doing? Who knows? Yeah. So, my pop well with me. It's not one of my favorite. Well, it's not bad. just not one of my favorite. Y'all know I would rather be out here with some rock star. Okay? But Popwell is good. 6 grams of fiber, can't beat that, with a stick. So far. Right, so far. When it comes to like a clear soda beverage. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to do was to stop off again at another hair store, because I wanted to change my hairstyle a little bit. But it's 99 degrees out here, and I think the only thing that would have made me feel good today is to have my hair up and out of the way. Woo. So yeah, and if y'all don't see this as a pillage, then you don't understand how I see it. I see that what had happened is during this recession and this depression was a pillage, right? And those, who raided other people's property reap the spoils, okay? And in the process of reaping the spoils, even if it wasn't a spoil that they absolutely needed, if they felt like they could market it and get it for a profit, then they made money, okay? And this is capitalism. And we're all guilty of participating in the capitalism, right? Because for the longest I was like, this is how I see it. I don't want to buy somebody else's, stuff that, might have been retrieved, through this, ill-gotten means of, that isn't supply and demand. Okay, it's not supply and demand when you force people to well, when you force people to be unemployed, and then you are no longer getting the tax credit for hiring a minority, so you figure why should you, and then when people say out loud, oh, the only reason why you hired a minority was because you were getting tax credit to hire them through the affirmative action, right? So now they're not getting that tax credit, right? They didn't think that tax credit was really their motivation until tax time. Once tax time comes around, now they are sitting up there trying to boycott the government along with the freed slaves, you know, and the bonded slaves too, right? It's like, wow, you can't even tell who are the slaves anymore because, you know, and let's talk about that, right? So when we're sitting up here watching, say, we're watching the displaced, right? When I'm watching the displaced, some of them, I've seen them from the time that they were like, they had to give up their job, they had to give up, you know, their home, you know, and even though they may not say why they had to do that, a lot of times it's because, you know, they were kind of forced out. And you know, I had talked about, you know, nonverbal racism, right? Just like you can be non-verbally abusive, right? So, yeah, I've been watching many people, you know, forced out of their homes. And some of them, you know, well, most of them are women. Some of them are women with children. Some of them are minorities, right? But interesting enough, you know, the minorities that don't want to, you know, be a part of this depression, you know, they went to illicit, you know, business practices, and that's just what they did. Okay, there's good and bad in all of the races, but usually, you know, it's usually the ones that, you know, that are disadvantaged in their minds to think that it's okay, you know, to, you know, do illicit business practices for survival. Now, honestly, there are white people that do it too. All right, but a lot of them, you know, don't have to. But I guess if they have to, they will. So let's keep it real. If they feel like they have to, they will. All right. So the main thing is, you know, you start to wonder, well, what would make them feel like they have to? Well, if they're not getting the tax breaks, if they're not getting the advantage, the privileged lifestyle, if they feel like, you know, they have to start working harder than normal, right? They would never survive in a world that, you know, the disadvantaged who has to work twice as hard or more, you know, just to survive. You know, they wouldn't survive. But then, you know, they'll give all praises, verbal praises, mind you. They'll give all verbal praises to, you know, well, you know, you're equipped for that kind of lifestyle. You know, kind of like what they did when, you know, they rationalized, you know, the people who had melanin to be the people to go out and work out in the fields. Right? Now, to me, I don't see there's anything wrong with going out and working out in the fields if you're compensated appropriately. But see, this is the whole thing that people are talking about, right? Before, you know, there was more compassion to pay more for doing the jobs that people didn't want to do, right? Like being a garbage collector, or a maid or a nanny, right? There was a push to pay them more, because that was the jobs that most people didn't want to do, because there was no prestige in doing it, right? Then they switched it around somewhere through inflation, through overcharging in other areas of our economy, and making it to where those higher paying jobs became the lower paying jobs. So then the lower paying jobs were not only the undesirable jobs, but they also became the lower paying jobs, right? So yeah, and this is one of the things that I had noticed, right? Because when I was looking up, who gets the business loans, and the reasoning why the women were 40% less likely to get a business loan was because, their occupations were involving daycare, healthcare, and something else. But my mind was stuck right there. How dare they not feel like daycares and healthcares are a reasonable business to invest in, right? Because we need daycares. School does not, correspond to the length of time that a parent is at work, right? When we have parents that are at work 10, 12 hours a day, then we have to have daycare for 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day. Why? Because, there's transportation issues that could be an hour or two, depending on how far they have to travel and how thick the traffic is, right? However, I have never in my life worked like within a half a mile of my workplace. I have never, right? I've always had to commute to my job. And usually the commute was about 5 to 10 miles or more to commute to my job. Always, right? But, I've always liked to work with corporations and, in government, like city, not the government like military, okay? So, however, I didn't really live in the city. I always lived in the suburbs because it was cheaper to live in the suburbs. It's really expensive to live in the city. Downtown, if you try to get a place downtown, you'll see that it's very expensive, right? The cheapest area that you can find, demographically would always be the south side. But then, if you check the statistics on what's going on in the south side, there's always, what looks like to be more crime always on the south side. So that's kind of like that abrasiveness, between the north and the south, right? In the north, it's all peaceful and cooperation, but the South is, rebellion and adversity. Okay? And we see that, playing out in our society, when it comes to our continent, the North, there's more, cooperation, more of a willingness, to get along, a willingness to, to negotiate, change. Whereas, the South, they want to do like a complete rebellion, revolutionary takeover, which, is not going to be good for either side going that route, in my opinion. But, thankfully, we're dealing with the age of Aquarius, and this is where, change can be consequently brought, can be brought into effect without necessarily, going to arms and destroying, property and all of that. And that's the beautiful thing about innovation. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So they have all of these, home developments, that are enclosed with fences and yeah. And it seems like I took a slower route to get here, wherever here is. Seems like I took a slower route to get here. So I am here. It's called Play It Again Sports, where you sell, buy, and trade sports items. Hold on. Okay. They didn't have a lot, but I did buy me a jersey, like a workout jersey, for $5. Right? It's this was a Nike, but it's the same color as Jimmy, so I bought it. Because I like the color. I was going to get white, and I was like, why are you going to get white when they have a maroon one right here? So, I asked them a few questions about them selling online, and he said, well, there's 300 of these stores that are probably in the process of, distributing online. This location, no, not so much, but other locations, they're willing to sell online. So, yeah. It's like I said, it's called Play It Again Sports. And I told him, how I thought it was a good idea because, so many times, proper equipment is required, and, to buy it new can cost a lot of money. And I think it's good that they have, where you can